G'day, y'all. It's The Edward Show. I'm your host, Edward Fox, and together we're going to dive into the lives and stories of extraordinary individuals I meet from every corner of our globe. G'day, viewers and listeners, or g'day, y'all. I got to get used to that. It's g'day, y'all. It's The Edward Show, and our special guest today is Noah Healy, and he has his own podcast, which we're going to talk a little bit about. Very interesting about what AI is doing and what it might do now and in the future. And then we're also going to talk about his company, Coordinated Discovery Market, through a company called Coordisc. And so we're going to find out about that. Noah, thanks for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me here, Edward. This promises to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, that's the goal, right? So we started off. You got any good dad jokes for us? I know you put one in your bio. I don't understand one. You're going to have to explain it to me.
Right. So
how did Caesar find Britain? Weenie,
yes.
Weedy, and Witchy.
Right. So Julius Caesar's most famous saying was "Veni Vici." Veni Vidi Vici.
Right, which I tried to find because I'd heard it somewhere before, and Google was not helping me out when I took 2 minutes to try and figure it out. So,
but that's actually a mispronunciation. So those are the Latin words meaning "I came, I saw, I conquered."
Right. That's man, that's what being a ninth grade dropout with.
Sure. Classic Latin actually pronounced its V's as W's, our best guess is, which means that Caesar would have found it weenie, weedy, and witchy. And of course, those are all reasonable approximations of various popular slurs against the British, that they are weenies. That the islands are weedy and that they are also quite witchy.
Exactly. And being an Aussie, anytime we can rag on the British, that is helpful. So I get to have a foot in both lands now, as I say, Australian by birth, American by choice. Hence, if you're watching the video, you're seeing red, white, and blue shirt. You might have been confused by that with being me saying I'm Australian. But Noah, I appreciate that joke now. It's better than my wife tells one as a chemist. She's a chemist and now a pharmacist, and she says, two guys walk into a bar, one orders a H2O and the other one orders a H2O2, and he dies. And I'm like, I don't get that one either. But, hydrogen peroxide, I've since found out it's not good in its concentrated form to drink.
It's quite explosive. In fact, you get up to a high enough concentration. Slagging off the Australians a bit, Carl Urban had a good one I saw on the tour from Thor 3. That film was shot in Australia.
Okay.
And he, of course, is from New Zealand. And he said that when he had to get through customs, he was asked if he had a criminal record. And so he responded, "Is that still a requirement?"
Right. Yes, exactly. And I love that. And I still use it today when I land in Australia. And the guys roll their eyes. And I was like, "What? You've never heard that one before?" And they're like, "Yeah, 4 million times a day." So,
sure.
Yeah, that definitely works. So Noah, where is home for you?
So a town called Charlottesville, Virginia. We're a couple hours south of Washington, D.C., and about an hour west of Richmond, which is the capital of the state of Virginia.
Gotcha. Okay. And folks, if you don't know, you can look it up on a map. I have been out there. Been through West Virginia too, which was quite a nice drive. My taxi driver that I was in Newark, New Jersey, and I needed a taxi to JFK. He didn't know how to get from Newark to JFK, so I missed my flight, and he got me back to Newark and wouldn't let my luggage out of the back of the cab until I paid him. This is a few years ago now, no Uber, and had to end up renting a car and driving from Newark down to DC to go to the Australian Embassy to get my passport at the time. So I got to drive all throughout that area, and I stayed around a couple of days and took advantage of it. So I love that part of the country. Don't like the traffic. Now I'm in Nashville. Really don't love the traffic, but I do love the people. So it's kind of works. So Noah, tell me a little bit about, let's go with coordinated discovery markets. Tell me what that means.
Well, basically, it's a way of doing marketplace price discovery using a coordination game. So the entire idea behind a marketplace is balancing supply and demand through price discovery. So the higher prices are, the more people will be willing to make whatever is being negotiated for, whether good or service, and the less people will be willing to use it. So the sort of basic idea is that as prices go up, there's less and less demand and more supply. And so at some point, the supply will dip below demand. And at that level of price, the number of people who want to make whatever it is that is desired will equal the amount that gets made to the amount that people actually want to buy at those prices. And there's a lot of developed philosophy around the notion that the closer you can operate your economy to those price levels, the more efficient and the more wealth that economy will generate. So markets exist to sort of get us into figure out where those things are and let people know so that they'll actually behave that way. Unfortunately, there's a sort of hidden third player. There's the marketplace itself.
Right.
And the market makes more money the more distance there is between the buyers and the sellers. The middlemen, as the wider apart things are, the more the middlemen can profit. And so what computers have really allowed the sort of cunning and clever and energetic to be even more cunning and more clever and more energetic. And so we've seen markets sort of spreading out. So they're still pretty much equilibrating around where prices are, but prices that the consumer pays go up and prices that the producers receive don't go up nearly as quickly. And I have found a way using a different sort of game, a different sort of strategy to take the existing incentives for the middlemen and turn them more or less precisely reversed, which gets them in the same boat as everybody else, where the better the economy functions, the more efficient the economy functions, the more money they make. And when they cause these kinds of dislocations, they actually make less money, which unfortunately now they actually make more money from economic dislocations, which is why we're seeing that happen more and more frequently over the last few decades.
So give me an example of both of those. Give me an example of a current market and how it works that fits that model that you were mentioning, and now the new market that you would like to see, or the new model.
So earlier this year, the London Metals Exchange was forced to take the nickel market offline. So basically, there's nickel mines that are well established, and there's people that make stainless steel that are also well established. People that mine nickel are basically just have nickel coming out of their ears, and so they need to take reverse positions. They need to sort of sell into the marketplace in order to make sure that they'll have buyers for their nickel. Whereas the stainless steel
which pushes the prices down, right?
Down, right? Yes. Whereas the stainless steel manufacturers have exactly the opposite problem. They're always going to be needing nickel, so they need to be buying future nickel contracts, which pushes the prices upwards. A group of people, actually a group of computer algorithms, were able to identify a dislocation, a sort of slight asymmetry in that marketplace, and effectively went in and started bidding the marketplace up radically, because this was going to essentially force out the margins of the people that make the metal,
Okay.
make the stainless steel. And it would have forced them into bankruptcy, but if it had come to fruition fully, then it would have made the people who had caused this market thing quite a lot of money. So the market was actually forced to suspend itself and stop trading because otherwise it would have driven the primary stainless steel producers on Earth into bankruptcy.
Would a corollary be what's the movie that they released recently, Dumb Money, where they pushed up GameStop stock, and would that be a similar?
That's another kind of incidence, yes, where a combination of people coming together and forming coalitions based on social media, essentially,
Right.
were able to create market signals that were not attached in any way to underlying market realities. And they were in the sort of case of the GameStop, we don't have a story about some part of our economy that is necessary to function. We have sort of this business that isn't doing very well within a paradigm that isn't doing very well, that's being attacked by people who frankly are just running algorithms to find opportunities to find money in the marketplace, that are themselves being attacked by people who have agglomerated enough market power that their actions change the market behaviors in ways that the algorithms had not predicted being the case. And so it's kind of bumper cars, but with real cars, basically, at
Right.
that point.
Now, where does your background come from to be able to pull this together and understand this?
So my background is studying nuclear engineering over into computational mathematics. And so pretty much since the year 2000, I've been employed off and on as various kinds of back office automator, data scientist, that sort of thing at various tech companies and other kinds of computer labs here in town. And I've been spending a lot of that time, as well as most of my free time, studying the math of computation and information. And that point of view gives me a very different insight into marketplaces. I see markets as an information processing system that used to exhibit super intelligence, which is what made it all work, that sort of finding those points that made the marketplaces efficient. But it's not a stable kind of super intelligence, as we plugged AI systems and other unthinking but very fast and sort of very confident computers into those markets. We've seen them decay. And what we're now doing is combining that with plugging ever more of ourselves mediated through computers into them. And they simply do not have the scaling capacity to take on board this number of human opinions combined with an even greater number of machine opinions, and produce results that have anything to do with actual reality.
So, what do you think is worst case scenario?
Worst case scenario, if we stick with these marketplaces, is the general collapse of the existing economies and everything that goes with them. This isn't rocket science. I mean, we've watched in the 20th century, we watched several major economies decide to abandon marketplaces and get the smart people to make decisions, and that was an unmitigated disaster. So I'm absolutely convinced that in order to maintain or expand complex civilization, we need things that are smarter and wiser than human brains to figure out the sort of core pieces of the planning and efficiency. It's
Right.
simply a matter of what the structures of those systems are going to look like. And markets have failed, but I have coordinated discovery markets, and they look pretty stable.
So, yeah. So, explain a little bit about how they work.
So they work on this sort of reversion principle. So a lot of people kind of think about this moving supply and demand with both things going at once. But one of the interesting things is that competition doesn't have to be two-sided to keep working.
What do you mean by that?
So you could compete over a share of a fixed pie, or you could compete over a share of a shifting pie, and you're still going to get competition happening, because doing better in a fixed universe gets you a bigger slice of pie, and doing better in a dynamic universe also gets you a bigger slice of pie.
Okay. Yeah.
And so what my system does is it essentially marries three different fixed games into one another, um, so that the three together behave in a dynamic fashion. So the each contributor is either acting as a producer or a consumer or a forecaster at one time. Any contributor can have multiple hats, but when you enter into the forecasting game, you're competing with other forecasters to figure out where prices are heading as far into the future as possible, as accurately as possible. And you're judged on your ability to get prices to where they're supposed to be as soon as possible. Whereas as a producer, you're judged on your ability to produce whatever the good or service that's being negotiated for at economic rates. And the more that you can push down your marginal costs, the greater your profits as you participate in the same price that everybody else is participating in. And as a consumer, you're rewarded for having higher value uses of whatever the underlying good or service is. The more value you can extract from it, the greater your profits will be. And so each individual is chasing a sort of share of a fixed group, but as the three fixed groups converge on one another, what you get is that efficient marketplace that then rises the tide and causes the growth across the full market.
So you would have some major corporations. Let's take Walmart, for instance, almost competing against really what they need to do. Or am I misunderstanding it? They're competing against their own self-interest by doing the way they do markets right now, driving everybody to the bottom.
Very much, yes. This is one of the unfortunate facts about the changes that have been wrought by computers, is that the things that led to being personally successful in sort of the pre-computer age still lead to being personally successful today. But whereas in the pre-computer age, they would also lead to like having a better marketing system or figuring out more efficient ways to cut things to the bone and so on. Those things in pre-computer system were also increasing total human capacity. Whereas with computers, since the computers are actually doing most of that work and sort of taking on most of that thing, what we're actually seeing is a focusing of those benefits rather than a sort of diffusion of those benefits. And so personal success is actually linked in most cases to the destruction of societal capacity.
Almost like thinner margins. You keep trying to slice this pie thinner and thinner and thinner, and trying to make you money, and it's just not going to work long term.
Absolutely. So an example from sort of the agrarian to industrial age transition, as industry really grew up and started to get a big deal, the weapons of warfare became radically more effective. And so the sorts of feudal-based leadership that existed at the time basically said, well, I've got better weapons, I can go conquer more. That's the entire point of, having countries, is so that the feudal lords can conquer people and have more territory. And that eventually turned into Napoleon, who has basically the best win-loss record of any military leader in all of history, and also was a complete and abject failure, because in spite of the fact that they had radically better weapons than anybody of the Bourbon era dynasties could ever imagine having, and in spite of the fact that he did march all the way across Europe and into Russia, it turned out that in the industrial period, having enormous tracts of land occupied by serfs wasn't how you got wealthy. The way you got wealthy was by building out industries, changing the way jobs worked, actually doing innovation in chemistry and engineering and so on, which have absolutely nothing to do with your ability to marshal a line of men and fire into, mass charges and whatnot. It's the same deal now.
Yeah, it really does come down to, you can boil it down to the fact he wasn't really adding value. He was just taking stuff that other people had and adding it to his stuff, right? Conquering. There's no added value in conquering. Whereas if I go out and I create a product or a service that adds value to your life that you're willing to pay for, then I have the right to make some profit on that because I've added value to you.
Certainly, but what we're seeing the most valuable companies doing, like Walmart or Amazon or Disney or JP
Apple.
Morgan,
Yeah. Yeah.
Apple, Apple to a slightly lesser extent, but still in all, they're conglomerating. They're aggregating multiple brands, multiple systems into themselves.
Right.
Apple, to some extent, is doing that for the semiconductor and silicon industry, but Amazon is essentially attempting to turn itself into a gateway monopoly, which is also what Facebook is doing.
Well,
And also,
it seems similar to the Napoleon model, though, that they're either buying up their competitors so their competitor can't get a foothold, or they're buying these products that they're hoping turn into something. But even if they don't, they've got enough cash on hand to basically conquer them anyway, right? So they're going to conquer all these businesses and hold them all together and say, hey, now, nobody can compete with us because we're so big. It's almost that Napoleonic thing. And it's why the little guy, if they can get outside of those marketplaces, still has a chance to be.
Yeah. And I'd say that's pretty much my working model for understanding the world, and I think it's a lot more realistic than the more popular views that are generally pushed around.
Well, when we think about where a small business owner is today, never before in human history has a small business owner had access to so much free exposure than today, right? When we can cheaply set up a domain, cheaply do social media, get all that stuff out there. Now we still have to build our network. We still have to get people to understand we exist, right? So our marketing doesn't go away, but it's when they start taxing us, when they tax the internet, and when they're going to tax us into submission. Before, when we wanted to print 1,000 business cards, it cost a ton of money to print 1,000 business cards. Now it doesn't. I go into Canva, I make a digital business card, I throw it on my phone, I text it to people, cost me nothing, right? 1,000 business cards used to cost me a couple $100. In 1983, when I could just go to a local printer and I had to print through him, now the marketplace is wide open. I can buy from anywhere, I can do from anything. So we as small business owners have to keep that thought in mind, that we better make hay while the sun shines, because those things that you're talking about are just going to make it tougher and tougher and tougher for the small business owner, unless we can implement some of these other models of markets that you're talking about.
Well, that's what I think we really are going to have to do, because while this much greater exposure you're talking about really does exist, that's also turning into much noisier channels.
That's right. The clutter of trying to get you. It used to be I could buy a TV ad or a radio ad or a newspaper ad or a Yellow Pages ad and get enough business to be profitable. Now, for me to buy enough advertising to get people aware of me, I can't afford it.
Well, again, see, that's just another example of the phase where the sort of marketing and sales benefits from a chaotic environment, as that noise level and clutter increases, the advertising can now charge more to get you to your contacts. And if they are forced to charge so much that you go out of business, well, so much the worse for you, but maybe there'll be some other sucker coming down the line. And we see this, you had mentioned Uber, their long-term business model, like right now, they're still shedding money hand over fist, but their long-term business model is to be the point of entry for transportation. So people wouldn't own cars, there wouldn't be taxi services, there wouldn't be freight haulers, people that wanted something, their bodies, their groceries, whatever, that's at point A to come over to point B, they would talk to Uber and Uber would tell them how much that was going to cost.
Right.
And that's a fantastic business model if you get there, and if society doesn't decide to criminalize you and treat you as you probably should be treated. But until you get to that point, it's not much of a business model. And of course, if you do get to that point, what kind of life is it to be a transit specialist, a Teamster, or whatever, where all you do is whatever this big monopoly tells you to do? That's sort of the driving force. So we're seeing businesses become sort of big and useless at the same time.
Yeah. So, because I think about like the taxi monopoly, right? In my little country town where I grew up, you had one group of taxis that all got together. They all owned their taxis independently, but you couldn't start a taxi company unless you became part of that mafia, right? The taxi cab mafia. To buy a medallion for a taxi cab that, they've made movies and done books and stuff in New York City, to get one of those medallions to run a yellow cab costs astronomical amount of money. And then you think, oh, well, rideshare is going to solve all those problems. And it just creates new ones. And now we have this bigger monopoly, right? That people are running around, and so how are you thinking? How are you going about with your different market models? How is that going to work? Or how could it work?
Sure. Well, basically what I'm doing is reaching out around the world, trying to find people who are in the financial space and therefore capable of actually legally running a financial institution. They have the economic wherewithal and the various sort of permissions and so on,
right?
And licensing the technology to them. The amount of work that has to be done to make the kinds of markets that I propose function is significantly less than the amount of work that has to be done to make existing markets function. So it's the sort of thing that they can run as a sideline for smaller, what might be currently served in over-the-counter spaces, where they can simultaneously de-risk themselves, lower their expenses, and get a much higher sort of profit out of them, and at the same time create a better marketplace for their customer base, which then would serve as the platform to demonstrate that it would work in larger and more important markets. And so
people are probably sitting out there thinking, like, are we talking another crypto? Are we talking a fiat currency platform? Are we talking something that works within the US currency or the particular currency that's in that marketplace? I mean, do any questions?
I'm mostly focused on sort of existing currency systems. One of the three people that I'm working with is attempting to set up a crypto market space that would incorporate my technology. But I'm very focused on sort of
standard currency, standard dollar currency.
Well, actual supply and demand, and actual supply and demand are almost exclusively attached to some existing currency, whether it's dollars or euros or Australian dollars or Canadian dollars or whatever.
Right. So the fiat currency of those countries because we see fiat currencies fail all the time too, right? We see changes and big switches, like India the last couple of years with Modi switching to their new I forget what rupee, and getting rid of the old, and then seeing what's happened in Venezuela with the failure of their currency. How do those things impact the type of market that you're talking about?
Well, currency valuation is a part of the risk and interest in any pricing model that exists.
Right. Yep.
And so a functioning marketplace needs to be capable of taking on board people's opinions about currency valuations as well. And so CDM's approach is essentially roll that risk into the general forecasting of where prices are heading, where if people who have opinions about the currency think that a government that's off the rails has been voted in and you're going to have a bout of hyperinflation, then there's an opportunity to keep your money by letting the marketplace know exactly when and how bad that hyperinflation is going to turn out to be. And that actually, are you familiar with the Cantillon effect?
I'm not.
So Cantillon, I think he's French. Anyway, he's one of those old economists, a couple centuries back, and he talked about inflation as a monetary phenomenon, that inflation happens when governments print money. But he then went on to explain to some extent why governments might decide to print money, because they could spend that printed money themselves or hand it out to friends of theirs. And that money, because people didn't know that it was just recently printed, or minted in those cases, would be treated the same as all other money. But after it had cycled through a few hands and the entire money supply had gotten up and people had sort of noticed that there was a lot more money around, then prices would go up after the early purchasers get to make their early purchases. And so that creates an asymmetry in the marketplace where the government and the government's friends can make a lot of money at everyone else's expense.
Where might have we seen that in the last 3 years or so?
It's extremely hard to imagine any government behaving this way when it would only lead to the immediate enrichment of themselves and their allies.
Go figure. And I don't think it matters what side of the aisle. We can look at both sides and see that that may have happened.
Yes, it's very easy when examining the political system of any government to see very strong indicators. However, if marketplaces are intelligent enough to be able to anticipate and effectively front load these things, the effects of inflating your currencies can be much more directly returned. So one of the things that makes tic-tac-toe an easy game to learn is that when you make a mistake, it's punished almost instantly and very clearly what the mistake was. And so pretty soon you stop making the 3 or 4 mistakes it's possible to make in that game, and then you just draw all the time. Games like checkers, for example, are much harder to sort of figure out how to play well, because a mistake that you make in the opening might not actually kill you for another 10 or 15 moves. In chess, maybe it's 30 or 40 moves. In a game like Go or Shogi, it might be even longer than that. And so when there's a long-term difference, if say inflation takes 3 to 5 years to work itself through the system, then by the time it starts happening, the fingers aren't getting pointed in the direction of the actual perpetrators anymore. But with a market that's capable of doing these sorts of anticipations, then you might see a strong counter to the desire to get the Cantillon effect working, because the costs could be much more immediate and much more quickly and accurately communicated to people.
Well, I don't know if you knew this or not, but I own a couple of barter franchises, barter networks, right? And so barter mitigates this high price or these prices through inflation because they can, if not directly barter, they can barter throughout a managed barter platform that allows them to trade their goods and services for things they need, but they're doing it at their wholesale dollar cost instead of their retail cost. So they're getting retail value, but they're only giving up their wholesale cost. And a lot of the times it's either excess inventory or unbooked appointment time. And it's funny, I see businesses striving to save 5 or 10% off their expenses, and they fold their arms and say, oh, I don't barter, I just use US currency. And I say, you're giving up 30 to 70% reduction in your expenses if you were to barter a percentage. And it's just the hardest thing to get across to them. Have you run into any of the barter networks that are out there in the universe?
I have not, and that's an interesting possible intersection point. I too have discovered it's incredibly difficult to get people to sit down and think about a system beyond their immediate experience.
Right. Okay. Well said. Actually, very well said. And I was concerned that I love the stuff that you're saying. I was concerned that I would not be engaged, but I think that has not been a problem. I don't understand all of it, but I understand enough to go, this. So my next step is to move us. Anything else you want to add to that specifically, or can we move into the way AI might be impacting this as well?
Yeah, let's go for AI. Absolutely.
Okay. So a big fan, obviously Chat GPT's in all the news, although I still run across people that aren't using any AI whatsoever, which is ridiculous. But I write one long sentence. As a ninth, I left school at 15 to start my first business. So I've had 40 years of business, and I got the education in business, but formal education on how to grammatically write a statement. Chat GPT can clean that up and fix that up for me. But that's not the kind of AI we're talking about. We're talking a lot more about more in-depth AI models and what they're going to be doing to marketplaces. I think we're seeing some good bots doing trading now, the algorithms and stuff.
We've been seeing them for quite some time, although not terribly publicly. So BlackRock, which is one of the most important companies on earth, has a system called Aladdin, which purportedly uses certain AI techniques to innovate new market trading strategies. And BlackRock consults with that and uses it to guide its own market strategies, as well as offers people the opportunity to buy time on Aladdin to receive advice.
Right.
And if you can tell the difference between people paying BlackRock for advice from their AI and the Wall Street Bets people getting together on Facebook and Twitter to talk about which stocks they want to go long and short on, then you're a smarter person than I am, because those look like exactly the same activity to me. Much less well known, there's a company called Renaissance Technologies, which is run by the richest mathematician on earth. And they're a hedge fund. They have no external clients. They're reasonably secretive about what they actually do there. But what they have let slip claimed is that they've been building AI systems to do their trading from them, and they claim that they have more or less abandoned human intervention in those AI's decisions. That from experience, they've learned that whatever the machines want to do makes more money than anything human beings advise the machines to do. And so they just keep coming up with new ways to work the machine algorithms and then do whatever the machines tell them to do.
So we were playing around with a little trading bot, and we were just paper trading Tesla with this bot, right? And we'd put in some numbers, and it showed us when it was making the decisions, and And we figured out that if we just let it trade on Mondays and Fridays, other than on days that they released earnings, right, that we were up 22% in the marketplace over a year, just letting it do all the trade. I mean, and this is like such a low level. I know it's not what you're talking about, but to me, it just blows my mind that I could have all the knowledge I wanted to, and I could just set this thing on automatic with $50,000 in the bank or $100,000 in the bank and let it do its thing on Mondays and Fridays, and it'll make me 20% on my money over the course of a year, and I don't have to touch it.
Well, yeah, I actually know a father-son team that is currently launching an app to go on people's phones to give that kind of trading bot capacity to anybody who gets their phone app.
Wow.
The son part of this father-son team is currently in high school.
Right. So what happens if everybody's trading via bots? How does anybody make any money?
Well, precisely. So what actually happens is the bots that manage to figure out how to exploit bot behavior will be the things that make the most money.
Right.
And so what we'll see, and what we're already in fact seeing, is a cycle of less and less relevance to actual physical reality and more relevance to whatever the sort of cash fight that's going on turns out to be. And so various sorts of agility and speed will rule the day, because that's what functions in the marketplace, and the markets will become less and less relevant, and we'll see stupider and stupider economic behavior until whatever the breaking strain is actually happens, if we last that long.
Yeah, and so is this the sort of conversations you get into with you and your podcast co-host on the fourth age?
Yes, we do. Although we don't really restrict ourselves to economics
Oh,
or
sure.
right now. Um, so the name, the fourth age, this is Marty and I met on a panel that he'd put together on AI ethics. And the panel was a success, and we had a couple more meetings and decided, hey, why don't we keep talking about these questions and issues, and do it on a podcast from now on. So we've had a few guests. We'll have those in, but we also talk to each other about some of these foundational and fundamental questions. But my sort of thesis is that there's been three big deal inventions that change humans' relationship to the environment in a sort of physical and energetic way, and they are the plow, the steam engine, and the computer. And the thing that distinguishes these in a really major way, in my opinion, is that there's a watershed between the economics, culture, and politics, and even religion of the societies that exist before and after these inventions. Plows, we see the beginning of urbanization. We see writing start happening. Warfare changes, population densities change. Then we get the steam engine. Those things turbocharge. We get entirely new forms of government, entirely new forms of worship. The market gets sort of turbocharged and put in charge of even more of society. Religion, also customs change. And so computers, basically, this is a thesis I've said many times, computers are a bigger deal than steam engines are. If you don't think that our fundamental institutions are going to either be unrecognizably rebuilt or simply replaced, or if not just collapse, then you're insane. I mean, could the monarchies of the Middle Ages have existed to today with the weapons of the world wars in their possession? Of course not. That's crazy. but industrialism would have handed them those weapons if they'd managed to hang on that long. And a couple of them did, and they lost those wars. So
Well, it's sort of
yeah,
like the analogy you talked about with tic-tac-toe and how quick and easy it is to understand that, you know, if you both have people at the same level, it's not winnable. It's going to be a draw all the time. What was the movie War Games, 83, 84, somewhere in there with Matthew Broderick, right? Where, you know,
right.
the computer
Yes.
learns that there can be no winner.
That right. It's a feudal thing. So I don't know what all of the feudal things that we're currently doing are. Uh, when you shuffle a deck, you don't know what the new order is going to be, but you do know that the cards near the top probably aren't going to be near the top again, and the cards near the bottom probably aren't going to be near the bottom again.
Right.
So some of the things that are leading to success today are certainly wrong, and some of the things that are leading to failure today are certainly right. And that's some of the stuff that we talk about, is what might some of those things be, and what might we be able to do. uh, Marty is more interested in the consciousness bearing nature of computer systems and sort of making the transition as painless as possible. I'm more concerned with the capacities of the systems, whether they have consciousness or not, and am more concerned with seeing to it that the transition occurs, rather than I think growth is better than decay, even if the pain is part of it. And so we bounce off each other, and then sometimes we have a guest and we bounce off them.
It's also interesting, and we could talk about this forever. Normally I do a 30-minute podcast, but these have tended to head out towards an hour because I think it's just a lot of interesting topics that you and we probably wouldn't have known each other on the street, right? We would have passed, got our coffee, whatever, kept going. And it's platforms like, what's it called? Is it Matchmaker? Is it Podcast Matchmaker?
Yes, Matchmaker. Yes.
Yeah, that's where we met as podcast hosts and guests, and looking for opportunities to meet, which is fantastic. Wouldn't have happened without computers probably. So there is that. Okay, Star Wars or Star Trek? Which universe is a better model of where you would like to see the world head?
Oh boy, that's a toughie. So I'm a much bigger fan of Star Wars than Star Trek. Star Wars is a long time ago, though. It's not a destination in time as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
Star Trek, Marty's a big fan of Star Trek. Uh, I'm a little on the fence about the value system of the Federation. I've heard it described as fully automated luxury communism. Uh, I think that there's more challenges and more interesting challenges than the Star Trek writers generally put out there. Let's see, which sci-fi universe?
If there's a better one, I'm open to others, but those are the two that I have been the most exposed to, I would say.
Yeah, that there aren't a lot of sort of big ticket sci-fi universes. Certainly not a lot of them that you'd want to live in. The Terminator
Right.
universe, for example,
Right.
is particularly off-putting.
Have you seen
Um,
the movie Creator yet?
I have not. No.
Okay. I would be interested for your take on that, and what AI. There's some. I enjoyed it. It was good, but I don't take a lot out of the movies. I just enjoy them. I just have a good time. So anyway, okay. So if you had to pick one,
uh, there's one of my favorite sci-fi books of all time is a book called The Shockwave Rider by a guy named John Brunner. And while the book itself is quite dystopic, it does in fact have a happy ending. And I'd say that happy ending is one of the best possible computer universes that I've ever seen written about.
Shockwave Rider, Rider.
Rider, yes, the
Okay.
Shockwave Rider.
Awesome. Yeah, I always love good sci-fi. My wife and I were just having this. She's a Star Trek fan. Didn't go to movies much as a kid, and I'm a Star Wars fan. I find the Star Trek universe, although I love watching it, I find it too sweet, too just unrealistic. Where Star Wars is can get very dark, obviously Vader and all that sort of stuff. But it sort of reminds me of America, even with all its flaws. I think it's the best country on earth, right? I feel that just in general, most generous people, but we have a lot of corruption. We have a lot of negativity as well. And so to me, it parallels more the Star Wars than it does Star Trek.
Yeah, I really sort of lean into the Star Wars mythic structure, and I saw a fantastic essay where somebody was pointing out that the Emperor is essentially the very best bad guy ever created. That he has every kind of power and every kind of evil that is possible to have. He's politically powerful, he's personally magnetic, he's got these magic death powers, he's physically formidable, but then he's also corrupt in every way that one can be corrupt. He's controlling and backstabbing and even hideous to look at and so on. And so this like omniscient wizard emperor warrior god demon thing is just like the ultimate bad guy, and that creates the setting for just the impact of that mythic story structure.
Well said, well said. So peanut gallery back here, my wife just threw in Stargate. She wants the Stargate universe to be discussed. I'm like,
okay.
I am a big fan of Stargates, though. I love the idea of Stargates. But again, all we've got is really a bunch of civilizations that parallel what Earth has. So I don't know that. I don't know that. She should come on her own podcast and she can talk.
I will counter because in the Stargate universe, Earth culture is created by alien visitation.
There you go.
So
what came first?
I will counter with Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency, where we are also the visitation, and there's also an AI component. The major character in that one developed a program that that doesn't tell you what the logical conclusion of a set of things is. It tells you what the necessary arguments for an outcome that you want are. So you don't ask ChatGPT for advice on what you should do given circumstances. You should ask ChatGPT how to rationalize the decisions you want to actually happen.
How to tell rational lies, yes.
Yes. And so the company that develops that technology is bought lock, stock, and barrel for enormous amount of money by the U.S. Defense Department for no discernible reasons,
right.
And he becomes quite well off, but winds up in a rather intriguing time loop problem with a robotic device from a different world that has developed robotic believer machines. Just as people have answering machines
right.
to talk on the phone when you can't have them, and VCRs to watch the television you don't have the time to watch, they have electronic monks to believe the ridiculous things that you don't have the time to ridiculously believe.
We were talking about, I was telling my wife that pretty soon, we'll have AI planning appointments with other AIs for both of us, and we think we're talking to each other, but we're not. We're just talking. Our AIs are talking, and they're our virtual assistants and planning those. So I tell her all the time, I say, as long as we don't go down the path of Blade Runner, I don't really want a Blade Runner, not 2049 Blade Runner. I mean the original Blade Runner, 80s Blade Runner.
avoiding pretty much any Philip K. Dick universe would be very indicated. The Heinlein's future history, in spite of the fact that Earth for quite a long time is essentially being policed by orbiting nuclear weapons, ultimately turns out to be pretty good. And the Foundation is significantly more advanced than Star Trek and the Federation,
Right.
if that's what you're into, and of course eventually turns into a galactic hive mind, presumably. So those are interesting and fun as well.
And then to end all argument, I got me a shirt the other day, my timey-wimey shirt with the TARDIS, right? You know, the TARDIS is so
Absolutely.
I throw in the Doctor Who universe into all of that, and I'm like, there you go.
Well, actually the ultimate right answer, if you really want to have as much fun as humanly possible, is the Number of the Beast slash Cat Who Walked Through Walls stories by Robert Heinlein, which extends the multi-person pansolipsism of the man from Mars into a device that is capable of narrative transition. So it's a time machine that can also go to any story. And they create in the Cat Who Walks Through Walls, there is a council of heroes essentially in charge of saving the multiverse from the ultimate big bad, and two of the members of the superhero council are Hazel Stone and her pulp action hero, very much based on Flash Gordon,
right.
who are both a part of the council because they're both real people
Okay.
in a multi-narrative universe. And in those books, they go to Alice in Wonderland,
Right.
and the the Lens universe, and a few others. And so that would include Doctor Who as a vacation spot, should you choose.
Well, I think that would be my son's a DM for a couple of campaigns, and I said, you know, if you could weave all these science fictions together into a DM campaign, into a Dungeons and Dragons campaign that took us through the Doctor Who universe and the Stargate universe, I think it'd be kind of fun. And then I said, but really, the one I want to see you weave Doctor Who, two British science fiction series, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and Doctor Who together. That would be my preferred universe to live in for. Anyway,
that would be pretty crazy. I actually I asked one of the AIs to tell me a story about Bertie Wooster hiring Sherlock Holmes.
See, oh man, some of those books I want to read like right now. Just make the book and just take my money, right? Just take my money and tell me where to get it from. But no, we could go on like this for hours. We probably lost the 3 listeners we had when we were talking about the economic stuff, but both of them were fun for me. Keep me updated, would you? I'd love to hear some more about how this develops.
Absolutely. Yeah, this was great.
Thank you. And folks, check out Noah and Andy is your co-host partner.
Marty,
sorry. Noah and Marty on The Fourth Age, a podcast all about AI that covers the gamut. And they can find you on all your popular podcast platforms, right? Say that 3 times real fast. Popular podcast platforms.
Absolutely.
Awesome, man. Hey, thanks a lot, Noah. And all his contact details will be in the show notes. Folks, thanks for watching. Please subscribe, listen, share, brag about us to your friends. And we'll catch you next time. G'day again. Well, that's it for the show. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like us, subscribe, follow, write a 5-star review, all the good stuff. Thanks a lot for listening and look forward to having you listen to the next one.